Jaguar Wright has once again set the internet on fire with explosive claims surrounding one of music's most painful tragedies, the death of Aaliyah, and how it allegedly connects to the rise of Beyoncé and even Blue Ivy. According to circulating interviews and viral clips, Wright suggests there was far more happening behind the scenes of the early 2000s music industry than fans were ever told, pointing to power struggles, control battles, and sudden shifts in who was positioned as the next global star. In this controversial narrative, Aaliyah is portrayed not just as a rising icon whose life ended too soon, but as someone who allegedly stood in the way of a larger industry plan. And when her career was cut short, the spotlight reportedly shifted in a direction nobody expected. Now, with Blue Ivy growing up in the same spotlight, online theories are spiraling again, asking whether history simply repeated itself in a more symbolic form. Before any of the conspiracy talk, before the viral clips and online debates, the real story begins with Aaliyah's rise as one of the most influential young artists of her generation. Aaliyah Dana Houghton entered the music industry in the early 1990s, a time when R&B was evolving fast and competition was intense. From the beginning, she stood out not just because of her voice, but because of her presence. There was a calmness in her delivery, a controlled softness that made her feel different from the louder, more aggressive styles dominating the charts at the time. That difference became her signature. Her debut album introduced her to the world as a teenager with unusual maturity in both tone and image. But it was her collaboration with producer R. Kelly on her early work that first pushed her into mainstream attention. Despite later controversy surrounding that period of her career, the music itself helped establish her as a rising force in R&B. She wasn't just another young singer being developed by the industry. She was becoming a brand of her own. Everything shifted again with her self-titled second album. This project marked a turning point where she began working with Timbaland and Missy Elliott, a creative pairing that would redefine her entire sound. The production was futuristic for its time, minimalist beats, syncopated rhythms, and a smooth vocal style that felt ahead of the curve. Songs from this era didn't just perform well commercially, they influenced the direction of R&B and pop for years to come. At this point, Aaliyah was no longer just a rising star. She was becoming a blueprint. Her image also evolved in a very intentional way. Styled by people like Derek Lee and later guided through film projects, she developed a look that was understated but powerful. Baggy silhouettes, sunglasses, and a quiet confidence that stood in contrast to the more polished pop aesthetics of the era. This made her especially influential among younger audiences and fashion culture, where her style would later be referenced repeatedly. Beyond music, she was also crossing into acting. Her role in Romeo Must Die introduced her to a global audience and positioned her as a crossover star in both entertainment and film. It was a move that suggested she was on track for long-term dominance, not just in music, but across the entire entertainment industry. By the early 2000s, everything about her trajectory pointed upward. International tours, Hollywood opportunities, brand partnerships, and a growing global fan base were all aligning at once. Industry insiders viewed her as one of the few artists capable of sustaining both musical and cinematic success simultaneously. Then, in August 2001, that trajectory stopped abruptly with her tragic plane crash in the Bahamas. And it is from that moment, this sudden, unfinished rise, that years later, speculation, reinterpretation, and online theories would begin to attach meaning far beyond the documented facts of her life. But at the time, all that existed was loss, shock, and the end of a career that still felt like it was only just beginning. After Aaliyah's tragic death in 2001, the entertainment world went into shock. At just 22 years old, she had already built a career that many believed was only beginning to reach its peak. Her passing didn't just leave a gap in music, it left a silence in a space she was actively shaping. In the months that followed, tributes poured in from artists, producers, and fans who saw her as a rare talent with global potential. But as the industry processed the loss, the focus slowly shifted. Not publicly at first, and not in any official way, but in conversations, in strategy rooms, and in how the music landscape began to evolve almost immediately after her absence. Around this time, Beyoncé was transitioning from Destiny's Child into a solo career. It wasn't an instant jump, it was a carefully managed shift. Destiny's Child had already built massive success, but the move toward Beyoncé as a standalone artist was becoming more visible. Her debut solo work began to position her as a central figure in modern R&B and pop, someone capable of carrying the genre into a new era. This is where the narrative begins to split into two layers: the documented reality of career progression, and the later online interpretations that try to assign deeper meaning to timing and success. From an industry perspective, what happened next was not unusual. When one major star disappears from the landscape, whether through retirement, tragedy, or transition, the industry naturally reallocates attention. New artists rise, opportunities shift, and labels adjust their priorities based on audience demand and market momentum. Beyoncé's rise, in this sense, was already in motion. Destiny's Child had been building toward individual projects, and her talent had long been recognized by producers and executives. Her transition into solo superstardom was expected by many who followed the group closely. However, years later, online spaces began reframing this timeline through a more speculative lens. Social media discussions started drawing connections between Aaliyah's death and Beyoncé's rapid ascent, suggesting patterns where there were primarily industry shifts and timing overlaps. This is where the first twist in the broader internet narrative forms. Not in facts, but in interpretation. The idea that one artist's absence directly enabled another's success became a central talking point in conspiracy-driven discussions. People began revisiting early 2000s award shows, interviews, and industry commentary, looking for symbolic meaning in moments that, at the time, were simply part of entertainment history unfolding in real time. At the same time, Aaliyah's legacy began to grow in a different direction. Instead of fading, her influence became more pronounced. Artists continued to reference her style, her sound, and her visual identity. Fashion designers, music producers, and younger performers increasingly cited her as an inspiration. In a way, her impact expanded even after her passing, which added emotional weight to the comparisons being made online years later. This blending of real industry evolution and retrospective internet interpretation is what fuels the conflict at the center of this narrative. On one side, there is the documented progression of artists building careers within a competitive and constantly shifting industry. On the other side, there are online communities reinterpreting that progression through emotional storytelling, symbolism, and unanswered curiosity about a loss that still feels unresolved to many fans. And it is within that gap, between fact and interpretation, that the most controversial theories begin to form, setting the stage for even more explosive claims that follow. As the online conversations around Aaliyah's legacy and Beyoncé's rise continued to grow, the narrative began to shift from simple comparison into something far more intense and speculative. What had started as casual discussions about timing and influence slowly evolved into theories that attempted to assign hidden meaning to nearly every major moment in early 2000s pop culture. This is where figures like Jaguar Wright enter the conversation, not as verified sources of fact, but as catalysts for viral controversy. Through interviews and online clips, she has made a series of claims about the music industry that have been widely circulated, dissected, and debated across social media platforms. In these discussions, Aaliyah's death is no longer treated only as a tragic accident, but as a symbolic turning point that allegedly reshaped the entire industry landscape. According to the way these narratives are framed online, Aaliyah represented a unique combination of talent, style, and global potential that positioned her for long-term dominance. Her sudden passing created a vacuum, one that, in the eyes of conspiracy-driven commentary, was quickly filled by the next generation of superstars. This is where the shocking reveal element of the online story takes shape. Claims begin to circulate suggesting that industry executives and powerful figures may have strategically benefited from shifts in the musical hierarchy following her death. These claims often lack verifiable evidence, but they gain traction through repetition, emotional framing, and the human tendency to search for meaning in tragedy. At the center of these discussions is Beyoncé's rise as a solo artist. Her success is undeniable from a factual standpoint. Chart-topping albums, global tours, and cultural influence spanning decades. However, in conspiracy-driven spaces, her trajectory is sometimes reframed as part of a larger, pre-planned narrative rather than a result of talent, timing, and industry development. The internet amplifies these ideas by connecting unrelated moments, award show appearances, stylistic choices, interviews, and even fashion symbolism. Each detail is reinterpreted as a possible clue, even when no causal link exists. Over time, these interpretations build on each other, creating a layered story that feels interconnected to those consuming it, even if it is structurally speculative. Jaguar Wright's comments are often inserted into this framework as supporting testimony, even though they are widely disputed and not substantiated by official records or credible investigations. Still, in the attention economy of social media, emotional impact often travels faster than verification. What emerges from this escalation is not a confirmed revelation, but a feedback loop, where speculation fuels engagement. Engagement fuels more speculation, and the original facts of Aaliyah's life and death become increasingly surrounded by layers of reinterpretation. By this point in the narrative, the story is no longer just about two artists or one tragic event. It has transformed into a broader cultural debate about power, influence, and how audiences process loss in the age of constant online storytelling. As these theories spread across YouTube, TikTok, and online forums, public reaction became deeply divided. On one side, many fans of Aaliyah continue to emphasize her legacy strictly through her music, fashion influence, and cultural impact. For them, she remains a groundbreaking artist whose life was tragically cut short, and any attempt to link her death to modern celebrity success is seen as disrespectful and ungrounded in evidence. At the same time, a different segment of online audiences became increasingly engaged with the speculative side of the conversation. These users treat interviews, old footage, and award show timelines as material for pattern analysis, attempting to draw connections between industry events that, in reality, are separated by years of documented history and unrelated career developments. In these spaces, emotional interpretation often replaces factual verification, allowing theories to grow rapidly without formal accountability. Within the broader entertainment industry, responses are far more restrained. Artists, producers, and executives rarely engage directly with such claims, largely because they are not supported by credible evidence and often fall into the category of internet speculation. Instead, the industry continues to acknowledge Aaliyah's influence through tributes, sampled music, fashion references, and retrospective recognition of her role in shaping modern R&B. Beyoncé, meanwhile, is consistently positioned in mainstream media as one of the most successful and influential performers of her generation, with her career trajectory documented through awards, record-breaking tours, and critical acclaim. Her public narrative remains centered on artistic evolution rather than external controversies. However, the existence of these online theories highlights a broader cultural shift. In the digital age, audiences no longer passively consume entertainment history, they actively reinterpret it. Social media platforms amplify emotional narratives, especially those involving tragedy, fame, and perceived injustice. As a result, even well-documented historical events can become re-examined through speculative lenses. This divide between official narratives and online reinterpretations continues to widen. While institutions and industry figures rely on verified records, audiences in digital spaces often prioritize storytelling that feels emotionally compelling, even when it lacks substantiation. As the online conversation reached its peak, the narrative began to tighten around a final, emotionally charged idea that nothing in this story was being viewed purely as coincidence anymore. Every past moment, Aaliyah's rise, her tragic death, Beyoncé's solo explosion, and Blue Ivy growing up in the public eye, was being pulled into a single continuous storyline by internet speculation. At this stage, Jaguar Wright's comments were being repeatedly resurfaced and re-edited into viral clips, often stripped of context and placed over dramatic commentary. In these versions of the story, her words were treated as confirmation rather than allegation, even though no official investigation has ever supported the claims being attached to them. Still, the emotional weight of her interviews kept the discussion alive, feeding a cycle where speculation and reaction constantly reinforced each other. What made this phase different was the way audiences began framing it as unfinished history. Instead of viewing Aaliyah's legacy as something preserved through her music and influence, some online communities started treating it as a narrative that had somehow carried forward into the present day. Beyoncé's continued success and Blue Ivy's public appearances were interpreted through this symbolic lens, creating an ongoing loop of reinterpretation. Within this environment, Even normal celebrity moments, award show appearances, fashion choices, or interviews, were being reanalyzed as potential signs, despite having no verified connection to the claims being made. This is where the story stops being about documented events and becomes entirely about perception. And yet, the most striking part of this entire discourse is not the theories themselves, but how quickly they spread once they entered the algorithm-driven attention cycle. Each repost, reaction video, and commentary breakdown added another layer, making the narrative feel larger and more interconnected than any single source could actually support. As the discussion continues to evolve online, one thing becomes clear. The story is no longer anchored in a single moment or claim. It has become a self-sustaining cycle of interpretation, where every new detail is shaped by what came before it. And that is where the narrative leaves off, not with answers, but with even more questions being asked than when it began. Before we wrap this video, it's important to step back and look at what's actually happening here. What you've seen online around Jaguar Wright's claims, Aaliyah, Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and Blue Ivy is part of a much larger wave of internet conspiracy culture, where old tragedies, celebrity success stories, and symbolism get tied together into dramatic narratives. A lot of what's circulating is based on speculation, interpretations of interviews, and heavily edited clips, not verified evidence. That's why these stories spread so fast. They feel connected, emotional, and shocking, even when there's no solid proof behind the conclusions being drawn. Still, the conversation says a lot about how people view fame, power, and the music industry, and why audiences keep revisiting unanswered questions from the past. But separating emotion from fact is important, especially when real people and real legacies are involved. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments, but keep it respectful and open-minded. Do you think the internet goes too far with theories like this, or is there always something deeper people are trying to uncover? And if you want more deep dives into viral celebrity stories, hidden narratives, and breakdowns of trending controversies, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay tuned, because the next story might be even bigger than this one.